Hello ladies and gentlemen, Yessik Ziiiq here again today to bring you a quick supporting video to kind of show you the process of supporting a large statue model. I've gone with a fairly simple model today, which is the She-Hulk model, and I'm going to be starting with this base. Now I've done a couple things to start with. I've already done the island scan on real accuracy. You always want to use real. I'm using the paid version of Lychee in order to use the real accuracy. If you do not have the paid version, I will be giving tips throughout the video on how to emulate some of the results of the paid version. So if you don't have the paid version, go to detailed and set your resin resolution to 10 microns. You'd never print in 10 microns, but this will actually give you a real scan or close enough to one. Generally, I like to have the layer thickness set to 0.03 when I do a real scan, because that's what I generally print at. 0.02 will have more islands, but those islands, if you print them at 0.02, or if you print at 0.02, print at 0.03, you're likely to hit those islands anyways, or they're going to be picked up by the model after one layer, so it's not a super big deal that they're missed. Although you do really want to support every island for various reasons. So I'm starting with the base here, and I've already hollowed it. I don't recommend hollowing any less than 2.1 millimeters. And I recommend putting the quality up to 3. Any higher quality can actually deform the model on the outside. And there's this quick little button here so you can check out the hollow on the inside. I put a hollow blocker on this surfboard. In order to do that, you just hit this button right here in the top right corner, and you go to add hollow blockers, and you can just place them and then adjust the size as you want in order to block the hollow. But I will erase that because I don't need it. And then it has to rebuild the hollow every time. Oh no, this song has lyrics. I'm on a royalty-free chiptune, so let's just skip a tiny bit here. There we go. I have a hard time focusing without music. Okay, so back to the outside here. So for bases, what you're going to want to do is essentially surround the outside of the base. You might wonder why no supports on the inside, and I will sometimes put supports in here, especially on this whole logo thing, but the base itself, as it builds up, is supporting itself. You only really need the outside ring. You might notice on the lower points I have a higher support density building up, and I'm using heavies, which are at 0.55 diameter. I tend to only use heavies for where they will not be seen. Almost every support will leave a mark. It's good to think of supports as little eraser tips. Anything under that support is going to be gone. So what you want to do is you want to have the support as perpendicular to the model as possible at all times. That way you have the weakest point of the support being the smallest point, and that way it will break off as flat as possible. And not to mention, it's easier to clip off if you then leave a mark underneath. So one thing that I'm going to try to hammer in here is that resin is a lot better at bridging than a lot of people think, as long as it doesn't have to bridge for a very long time. So these supports here, even though they look a bit sketchy, are perfectly fine. If you want to improve them slightly further, add more support, you can hold Alt and double click in order to drop a support to the ground. And then holding Alt will actually give you another tool, which is the ability to link new supports to a previous support. So as you can see there, I'm now building up on the bottom of this, but I'm doing it from that other support that I clicked. That was holding Alt to click once, and then click again. There we go. Let's do that for the other side right now. I'm still using heavy supports here, and the reason for that is that I don't think the tips of these fins matter all that much. I probably should be moving down to mediums though. So I'll replace those with mediums in a couple seconds. Just wanted to make sure this wasn't dropped down how it is right now to the actual model. You want to prevent yourself from doing model to model as often as possible. They're sloppy, they're hard to clean up, they're just not great. So once again, I'm going to brace these two so they have a bit of extra support, and then I'm going to start building up here so that I can so that these actually build upwards. You always have to see this white line here. You trace it upwards and you can see what is printing where, and then you can make an estimation for how the weight will pull on the model. So right now the weight is going to be pulling this way, so I kind of want to support it more from the bottom here, but I need to do kind of a bare minimum because I really don't want to do a model-to-model support here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep building like this and see if I can't get any more supports upwards like this. Again, holding Alt is the bracing mode, so if you need to create a brace between two or more supports, hold Alt and then just draw that brace. And you can build kind of a lattice in order to gain some extra strength. If you hold Alt and Shift, you will draw a support from the same point as the support you have selected at present. So that is what I did just there. Another thing to note with Lychee is that it will always select the previously selected support. So if you make yourself a special support in some way, like let's say this is a very delicate area and I need to make this smaller, and then I need to make this longer, and then I make this tip a bit smaller. This is in the advanced mode that you get to by pressing space. You do not have access to this unless you have the pro version, unfortunately. But now you notice that all my supports are that weird design. And that can be very useful because you can actually just pick up supports from elsewhere on the model in order to place them. Anyways, going back real quick here, undoing a lot of this, because I do not need a weird support like that. I think those two fins will print now, so I'm just going to move on to the other parts of the base. Bases are always a little bit difficult, or not difficult, but a bit weird because you have to kind of get around the base in order to actually support any of the detail on it. You notice that this doesn't actually take long before it reconnects with the model. There's not much weight behind it, so a single medium support or light support or two light supports should be enough to actually hold it together. When you see the white line become a long space, that generally means it's a big overhang, and if it's holding any weight, you're going to want a couple supports there to make sure that it doesn't sag at all. Okay. So with bases as well, you're going to be hollowing them. Again, I've told you not to hollow beyond 2.1 millimeters, but it does also mean you have to support the inside, because the inside will have islands. See, I got to the inside by pressing that button right there. And if those islands don't print, you'll end up with big gaps in the top of the base, and it will just look horrible. It'll be split and terrible. So you can see all the islands are just marked. You just want to make sure that you're not doing anything weird with the supports and that they're all printing. Keeping in mind that these little stick supports, if they're what they want to put, are going to hold a tiny bit less weight than these larger supports. You don't have to be too careful about what you put on the inside because these supports are just going to stay there in the long run. I do see somewhere else I need a hollow blocker though, so I'm going to go back to the hollow blocker mode and just place a little box right here and then update that. I think I might have created an island with that, so I will also go ahead and fill that island. So exit that, back to this mode, and it didn't actually create an island. Okay, excellent. So back to the exterior mode. Done with this base for now, except for this logo, and this is where the only time I recommend using the add support to all islands button. Just pick medium supports. For me that's the hotkey A. You can set those hotkeys as you want, and then just add support to all islands. And that will be enough to support just the logo. I'm a bit worried about the structural integrity because I had to have this base at not so steep of a tilt so the surfboard could be printed. So I'm going to put a few more heavies along the bottom here and up the sides a tiny bit, just to have a tiny bit of extra support for this whole piece of weight. That's done. Might as well save it. I always save LYS underscore and STL underscore. I do not recommend working on more than one thing on a plate at the same time. It keeps your files organized and your ability to print things a tiny bit more, how do I put it? You can be more granular. You can be like, oh, this hand misprinted, I need to reprint the hand and this part. I just really do not recommend putting everything on one plate. It makes for a disorganized mess. So moving on to hand one here. One of the things, now that we are on to other pieces of the model, that is important to note is that you always want to orient as vertically as possible, because the print on the sides is going to be the most detailed print you have, and the print on the underside and top are going to be the most visibly layer lined. So if you're printing at 0.05, the layer lines are going to show up. Or sorry, what I was going to say is that a lot of printers have a maximum resolution in the XY direction of like 47 microns, but you can print 20 microns in the vertical direction, or 30 microns, and that is a considerably higher resolution. Both those resolutions combine to make the total resolution, but if one's really good, the other can be a bit worse. A lot of modern printers have XY resolution of like 37 microns now. So more lyrics, so I'm going to skip what's going on right now. There we go. I guess advertisement for that channel. Pretty good chiptunes so far. I just wanted something kind of non-offensive that people could listen to. So you always want to start out with a heavy. You can tell if an area is going to print flat if it is a large white line. Again, this is just showing what is printing in what order. So the line is essentially your print layer. So if you see a large space, you have a space that you can put a heavy there, and it won't be taking up any detail. So if it doesn't come off with a twist, you can at least snip it and it will be flat. So for this, because the weight is pointing so straight up and down, I actually don't need any more support than just this. Now it's time to support the fingers though. Important to see whether or not the fingers are attached. In Lychee, if you press F, you recenter your camera on your mouse and it will reset your zoom level too. So you can continue to zoom in further if you hit F in order to recenter your camera. Okay, so these fingers are thankfully actually touching the model. So it only has to print this much before it reconnects, so light supports will be more than enough here. Here though, this actually has to hold a fair amount, about this much, before it goes on, so I'm going to actually put a second bracing support. I'll often do this in 3 or 4 directions for very heavy things. I call this chandeliering, because you are not actually building a model upwards, you are hanging a model from flexible supports from a ceiling. If it would not make a good lamp, it will not print. So back to lights for this, and then this is done. If you have a model that's tall enough or that you really want the braces to come off in segments, you can add update bracing. Sometimes for more detailed models, that is not something you want to do because it will actually tie the model in and make it much harder to remove the supports. So moving on to hand number 2 here. I always erase the files behind me, but I always keep a copy of the originals as well, just zipped up. For your own personal use, I highly recommend only keeping the supported copies, just because it turns into a data nightmare if you don't. So once again, orienting the arm vertically, doing a full island scan. You can actually check for islands with tools like UV tools after you've done it, and I used to have to do this before island scanning existed. But the island scan is pretty accurate. Just do not trust it 100%. Trust your eyes. You know what an island is. And if you don't, I will actually give you a definition of an island, because I've had certain people ask. An island is something that does not connect to the plate in any way, and therefore needs supports. If you think this island is so small it doesn't need a support, then what you're saying is, I don't believe this thing could print. So if you think that the detail can print, you need to support it, or else it won't show up. So this arm is actually printing slightly this way for the first bit, and I did that so I could access the underside of the fist. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to readjust this support so that it's not clipping through the edge, or that it's clipping through very little, and then I'm going to move to a small support and put a couple over here. Now these are not holding weight, all they're doing is they're making sure that the weight is balanced upwards and downwards. You always want the vector of the weight to be straight up and down as much as possible for any given model. And this is just because it helps the islands not need to be supported as much. Like, the supports do their best work if they're oriented straight up and down. I've seen experiments in the past and done experiments myself that have shown quite large pyramids held by a single heavy support. And that's what I mean. If the support is straight up and down and the weight is all balanced straight up and down, you actually do not need to to support it much. So saving that arm. Some of these, this might be a bit of a long video, and some of these parts might take a little while to scan. I'll try to think of something to talk about while it scans. Heads can be a bit tricky, largely because of the hair, especially on female models who don't tend to just have essentially what is a molded on crew cut. And this model especially has some pretty intense hair. So what I often do for these models, and this is a bit risky and a bit challenging, is instead of risking all of these failing, every single one of these pieces of hair, I will actually balance women's heads on their backs. And I'll do that so that I only get islands as much as possible on the top of the head. The top of the head actually has a lot of flat areas. And remember I said that the supports are kind of like eraser tips. If they are over a curve or a bump, that bump is gone. So you want to find flat locations, and you have to kind of build up and try to find excuses to put mediums and heavies on if you do this. So first of all, you want to identify the lowest point, which is right here. And then you want to take a quick look at the lowest point and see what its angle is like. So unfortunately, I can only really start with a small support here. So instead of one small support, I'm going to do 3 small supports hitting from the 2 different sides of this hair. And that should equal up to about a medium. And then I feel like I can actually place a medium in here and a medium right here. Again, looking out for where there are flat spaces and where I can actually impact the model at 90 degrees. Again, this is smalls, and I'm going to try to get smalls from various angles, just looking my hardest for places that I can fit in a medium. Smalls are not great at holding weight. It is possible, and I have before supported something's actual weight in ultralights or even ultralights, but without very good settings it could fail on several printers and would not make for a great and consistent consumer product. Let's go ahead. See, this is actually kind of an island here, and so is this, and that's why you don't trust the actual island scan, and instead look at these white lines and try your best in order to catch all the islands yourself. This is a bit difficult, so I'll do that right there. This looks like a medium could fit. And I feel like I could actually fit a couple more larger mediums here and skip this because it's lyric full. And I think now I'm holding enough weight on this model in order to print it, so I'm going to just catch the rest of the islands and balance out the weight so that it's bouncing up and down, as I said before. Right now it looks like it is doing the trick, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab these little hair tips. Remember, you can look at this white line and be like, would this print if the support was just continuing on? Another thing you can do is hold Alt and Control. That takes you into mini support mode, and you can actually get a better angle sometimes by drawing a support between a previously existing support and an island. Always remember to expand the base tip though if you have the Pro version. If you don't have the Pro version, you can't do that, unfortunately, because remember that these will always snap at their narrowest point, but if the tip diameter and base tip diameter are the same, the entire string is the narrowest point. This will create a set of strings on your model that won't be absolutely great for removing. You'll have to scrape them off with a knife. But here, for instance, I can actually just take this small support, and I like to get the initial support pointing the same direction as the hair, if possible. So get in there, adjust so that it's as close as possible to right there, and then grab it from a second angle. This can be an ultralight and maybe even an ultralight right there to hold it. I believe that this would keep printing even if it was just a light support, so I'm fine with just that as a result. Can't quite get the same good angle for this one, but I have to start on an ultralight. Remember, the weakest point in the support will break first. If the detail itself is smaller than the support, the detail will break, not the support. So this one I'm starting with ultralights, and I'm trying to look for the first place where I feel like I can get away with putting a light. There we go, and then one more, and that should build up quite nicely. Let's move on to some other hairs. This one could be a bit hard to get to. Fortunately, Lychee is pretty good at angling supports in at angles that are doable. There we go. So again, starting with an ultralight there because the detail is smaller than any other size of island, and then moving to a light where I can, and then this should be able to build up perfectly fine on its own. And just a few more little ones of those to do. Remember trying to get the initial support at the same angle as the hair is going to build, because that way it will just continue to build as if it were the support itself. Did I even hit Alt 1? Oh yeah, okay, I'm recording. I can see it in the corner there. I was like, am I recording right now? Because if not, I've been talking to myself for a little while, and that would be annoying. There we go. Building a mini support. As I give more directions and give more instructions, I will be silent more of the time as I just apply said instructions to the repeating patterns. Supporting is all about problem solving, pattern recognition, and physics puzzles. So all it is just a bunch of little physics puzzles for you to enjoy. Put on some music, have a good time. Consider it almost like model assembly, because 3D printers, we have an easier time with model assembly anyways. So this is our version of that work, and it's much cleaner, much easier on the hands. Very much worth taking the time to do properly, instead of just auto-supporting. What are the dangers of bad supports? Some people think that it is just failure, but there are actually extra dangers to having bad supports. First of all, you can actually damage your printer with bad supports. Well, actually, mainly you can damage your printer with bad supports. There are two major ways that this can happen. One is an island isn't supported and it gets left behind on the FEP. The best case scenario is that when you next hit print, your printer descends and it pushes the little bit of resin that's stuck on the FEP through the FEP, denting it or puncturing it. Now, in worst case scenarios that I've seen, this can actually press down so hard and so sharply that it cracks the screen under it, leaving you with like a $200 bill. And even the punctured FEP is like $25. It's no joke. It's better to just do your supports well and have a very, very good end result print. Okay, so I'm just making sure that there's no actual inner cavity there, because that looked like it was inside the model, so I just wanted to make sure that there was nothing weird going on there. If there's cavities in the models, they fill with resin and they'll burst over time as the resin contracts, and you do not want that happening. Okay, so this is done. This one I will actually brace. I just select, you can have none selected or all selected when you brace. I usually have a couple supports selected, so I just select all of them, then hit add update bracing. And now we move on. We continue. As they famously say in Clair Obscure, whenever you finish a fight. Okay, on to the legs now. I just have to avoid the not safe for work torso because this will be posted to YouTube, and YouTube's pretty prudish that way. Okay, leg time. Legs, there's two ways to do, depending on how much detail there are. You can essentially do them from the top or from the bottom. This one I'm just going to support from the bottom because it has a nice natural shape. It's going to be very tall. I'm searching for islands. I always search for islands. I'm pretty sure I could just spot them all by eye on this one, but you never know when there's going to be human error. It's best to let the computer correct for you and let you correct for the computer. I hope my adjustment is right here and this isn't like too unenjoyable in terms of the bit tunes in the background. But they don't seem too loud to me. So hopefully that all turns out well. So just a heavy on the corner here. You almost always want to anchor on a heavy if you can get away with it. If it's never going to be seen, absolutely. How did I decide on this corner, or this side, for the side supports? It's because the model is actually printing this way at present, so it is pulling this way at present. Remember, you are hanging something from a ceiling. The weight pulls the opposite direction that you might think it does sometimes. And get a medium in there, get a heavy here, grab a heavy on the back for foot, and this should actually be more than enough to hold the entire model. Like, I could put supports on the sides, some people would. A lot of supporters that I've seen will put supports all the way up, but what is it supporting is the question you want to be asking yourself. Okay, not go to layer, hit the wrong hotkey there. Let's change up a bit and start with thigh 1 here, just so that we're alternating and keeping ourselves entertained. Weirdly enough, in supporting multiple parts, sometimes keeping yourself entertained is the hardest part. So she has a bit of weight going on in the butt area, so I'm going to move her forward a little bit. Remember, you want to balance that weight straight up and down, and you also want to avoid flat surfaces printing downwards. So having this angled is a good thing, because you really want to have a starting point for your print, and you want that starting point to be a heavy anchor. So this one I'm going a bit heavier than I normally would on this bottom part, and that's because there is so much weight building up. And I'm actually going to take a couple of supports and place them right there where I think a bump will actually not even detract from the model, it might enhance it. And I'm going to put that. This is an overhang. Overhangs can sometimes droop and delaminate. It doesn't usually happen with proper exposure, but if I'm doing a commercial product, one support there is probably a good idea. Says there's 3 islands remaining, and they are all fake. Lychee really hates sharp edges. It has something to do with where the model, or the program, thinks the model ends and where it doesn't. Sharp edges are sometimes seen as infinite by software, but they are not an issue. They will print properly if you just erase the islands. Okay, moving on to leg 2 after thigh 1. Once again, same deal with leg 2 here. I like to do legs feet down if possible, because then all the islands are on the feet, and the feet are invisible to anyone anyways. I do, as a professional supporter, get to observe foot texture meant for nobody but me. That is a special treat reserved for people who do lots of support work. And if you're very lucky, sometimes you'll even find secret genitals. That being said, none on this one at the moment. Yeah, it's just a funny thing that's happened to me a fair amount. Like, the sculptor goes into far more detail than they ever should. At one point, I was inside somebody's throat supporting a uvula that will never be seen. That's another example of weird things that I've seen. There we go. Save that as both an STL and an LYS. STL is editable, LYS is editable, STLs are usable on all slicers. So I like to save as both. Okay. Interesting position on this thigh. I think I still want to go from the bottom though and leave this. You want to have, like, the big flat surfaces that connect are a great place to put supports, but they're also not really, you don't want to mark them up too badly, because then you have to sand them down before you can actually place, put them together. So you still want to be fairly cautious, you still want to keep flat surfaces, you still don't want to over support, because you don't want to create extra work for yourself. So here, because this is such a large and awkwardly weighted piece, I'm going to put 2 mediums on that spot and 1 medium here. Once again, this is a natural bump. I think an extra bump there would look fine. Then there are 2 islands there. I think I have to put 1 more medium support there. And this should print perfectly well. This one, Let's put it this way, if I was not test printing for OXO, I would probably put a bit more support on this one or support it from this side. But I kind of like the idea of supporting it vertically the way it's supposed to be displayed. Next is the torso. Okay, so torsos, there's a variety of ways they can go. Often I end up actually supporting them on their neck because I don't like supporting the arms. And often if I support them on their neck, the arms actually create a nice natural V, as they're almost doing here. But in the case of She-Hulk, these muscles are a bit too defined, so I'm actually going to support her this way and support the muscles from the underside where you're going to get less visibility. And I'm actually going to create a little pyramid with her so that this arm doesn't need any support at all, and so most of the support can be on this side. There is no perfect orientation. There are tons of rules of thumb, and I have broken all of them multiple times, even my own. Just keep in mind that all the rules that I'm teaching here are made to be guidelines, and that there are almost always exceptions for what I'm saying, and different ways of doing things than what I'm doing. These puzzles have multiple solutions. Okay, so let's start with a heavy let's start with a medium on the inner thighs here, because I think that's what I can really get away with. And then now I'm on the outside. 2 heavies there. These will leave a mark. So you see how right now the shortest point is actually this way through the support? That's because of the angle that it's hitting at. You can actually solve that. And this support might seem pointless to certain people. Alt-V in order to straighten the support. In all honesty, I want to see if I can prevent the program from stopping me from going higher than it's supposed to, because I would actually keep this support even if it was a reverse support, meaning that the model built up from it, because the point of this is not to hold weight. The point is to keep it from pulling in this direction. Fortunately though, we have this nice little peg here which I can support the hell out of, and that will actually do the same thing, because this peg will just act as a major support on its own. So I can just kind of put a huge support right there, and those will do their job. Back to light supports right here, and then a couple of lights here, followed by a heavy, and then I can just surround this in heavies. Remember, the inside of the model will support itself. It's only really the outside that needs the help. Once again, going for a medium there, because that's what fits. A couple mediums here, and then some heavies again where they fit. Okay, so I did notice that this is going to require a tiny bit of boob support. I'm going to go with mediums here. So you can see there's a nice big wide oval, but where it starts turning, I'm going to start putting a couple more mediums, and you can see right here it reconnects with the model, so it doesn't need any more. This is very similar in that it doesn't do much before it reconnects with the model, so those 3 mediums will be more than enough. Now here is where I'm going to have to maybe do a bit of work that I don't want to do. First of all, I don't like the angle that hit on. So starting with a medium, going 2 more mediums. See how I'm following the line and putting the mediums where the line is thick enough to create its own flat surface? This could be a large right there. That looks good to me. And then 1 more medium there. And I might need another one here. Whenever you de-support something, take supports off of something, be sure to feel the supports, feel how they're hanging on, kind of familiarize yourself with the material, because what we're doing is just low stakes engineering by instinct, and it's important to kind of know what you're working with when it comes to that. So as you can see, if we look at how this builds up, it builds up here, it's supported by all these weights over here. These hold it from twisting this way so that we don't get any layer shifts. And then the arm also needs to be supported. This arm barely needs any support, and we are done. Select all the islands, add update bracings, save, and finished. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I will probably be making more of these videos, and I will also be streaming occasionally on the OXO Discord server, so that people can ask me questions. I'll be recording those sessions as well, just for the information. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do like, comment, subscribe, follow OXO Miniatures on Patreon, and check out her Gumroad, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.